So this was an early possum poem. Oh, possum. They're non-native, remarks the milky-eyed lawyer, whose name I don't know, but who has joined our table at the pizzeria on Capitol Way. He's telling his story of a criminal convicted for swerving and killing a possum. Marsupials, the word swirls around in my mouth. Possums, they carry babies in pouches, my unuttered thought. Non-native, he continues, like the gray squirrels who weren't here when he was a kid. Disgusting creatures. He's unaware of my musings. Ridiculous, he was convicted. They're not even native. He closes his case. So I mention the nutria because I know a bit about non-native too. But he's moved on, so I don't say what I know of green English ivy, golden Scotch broom, or Himalayan blackberry, smothering the prairies and choking the woodlands, climbing the trunks of the western red cedar, and brown-eyed me, and blue-eyed lawyer, and plain house sparrow, we're all non-native too. I'm gone somewhere, beyond the pizzeria, silently rowing names along these shores, Priest Point Park, Olympia, Mount Rainier, and the Straits of Juan de Fuca. What restless waters on my tongue, my mouth a pocket too full to speak, trying to savor names not my own, Tahoma, Squia'l, Puyallup, Nisqually, and Squaxin. Oh, possum, squirrel, salmon, swallow, forgive me, I live here. And this poem has a footnote. It's that the word possum was borrowed from the Powhatan language, which the language became extinct in the 1790s when speakers of the language, under duress, were forced to speak English. I decided to apply to be the city's Poet Laureate when they were accepting applications, really for two reasons. One is that I had completed my master's thesis 2 years ago, and really kind of stopped writing after that, or had this stall in my writing. And the other reason was that the theme for this tenure of the Poet Laureate position is climate change, so bringing awareness of climate change through poetry. And since so many of my poems deal with the natural world and deal with ecological crises, and because the timing felt right, I really like the role because it balances out in many ways my teaching role. Readings that I've been doing tend to appeal more to elders than to young people. So in many ways I see this work that I'm doing kind of bridging the work that I do around writing and poetry with young people and with elders. And to me that seems really important around the issue of climate change. That we find ways to have dialogue and share our emotional experiences about climate change together, because I know that young people have different emotions around it than elders, but we all, I think, share a sense of fear and maybe grief. Part of what I feel around climate change is this, I feel compelled to act, and yet there aren't actions that are capable of dealing with it on a really big scale. And I think we're presented with information on a really big scale, even if it's about weather events that are local. The backstory of climate change is so global and big and in a way incomprehensible that it can freeze us. And so I'm sort of interested in thinking about it on a much smaller scale, like in our circle of influence. I don't think of myself as an activist, but I do think of myself as someone who is civically engaged. And poetry, I think it's a way of engaging the world and engaging the world emotionally. And I don't see poetry as separate from politics. I've had some criticism that my poetry is too political, but there's plenty of political poets, and I'm not willing to be apologetic about it. It's like, no, my poetry is political as I am. And it doesn't mean that I want my poetry to all be a political statement, but engages with politics and it engages with community. Oklahoma. Salish refers to the Lushootseed language, and the sea received this name. On this inland sea, there are other worlds where words slip like water in our mouths, where orcas and otters slide along in water fed by the Nisqually, the Deschutes, and the Duwamish. Before us, before photographs, before bridges or oil trains, before gardeners with shovels or housing solutions, a misty, mythic world. And when we're gone, there will be new worlds, other estuaries to restore. Nisqually, our example, reaches a briny tongue, reclaiming tidelands once dammed. Listening to the far Elwha, one hears the salmon travel a river's route home to die, river revered, river as healer, river as last rite. Many friends have died here where Salish fingers reach our shores, where Tahoma's mammoth rock heart watches over our watery world, slumbering in uncertain solidity. Tacoma, Tacoma, the word ends in air, in fire, in awe. This Oklahoma, in many ways, is a response that I was having to the complications of land acknowledgments. So there's a point at which I started to feel really uneasy during land acknowledgments. The recognition of land that's traditionally belonged to peoples. And I think for me it's complicated because it continues to transfer this idea of ownership of land to human beings. And I think that's complicated anyways. Mm-hmm. And then I also think it doesn't acknowledge enough the violence done to indigenous peoples all over the world, really. So, and the racism, I think I'm going to call it racism, that is under that violence. And I think what happened for me in the writing of the poem, there's so much I'm acknowledging or expressing around acceptance of death, the deep time of the natural world, the things that seem so solid and certain that aren't, and also the mystery of what language holds. So when part of colonization, as the last poem in the possum poem, involves killing languages, so killing that connection between human beings and their capacity for storytelling in their own language and for the ways things were called and named. And I'm complicit as in the legacy of white settlers, and there's no way for me to really reckon with that. Sometimes with the poetry, I'm dealing with that or responding to the emotions of that, but I'm not claiming to reckon with it, really. I've put together a collection, and this is the last poem in the collection. It's called Last Resort. And I wrote this poem after reading about Jeff Bezos naming his project Blue Origins. Last resort. There's water on the south polar solar terrain of Mars. Good news, apparently, for those who see their fate in abandoning our world of water and lava. Given a choice, I'll stay behind with other crawling creatures living among the rubble. It's a loss I dare not romanticize, the extinction or escape of the meanest predators, walls of fire, rivers of rain, winds of destruction, the suffering. It seems the lowly, though, are surest to survive, the scavengers and foragers, parasites and fireweed, clover, bedbugs, sugar ants and ferns, deer, raccoon, rats, possums, gleaners, and fixers. So let them go, the shadow kings with their shiny things and dry cleaned suits. Let them leave our blue origins, the ancient paths of ferns, their mother's arms. Let flow the deep rivers of water and lava from a jeweled underground of ancient saints, seed and larva, rhizomes, embryos, mycelium, mitochondrial repair, underworld intelligence. Let it renew, renew while my skin withers to husk and to dust. I love collaborating. So, most recently, I collaborated with Liza Brenner, who's a painting instructor at SPSCC, and we were it was more parallel than actually collaborating, but we made the plan together that we would be engaging our students with a project around the theme of habitats. And then we displayed the work together at Arts Walk at Mix 96. So Arts Walk Friday evening, we had a poetry reading and we hung the paintings and we had student work, and we also had community members reading poetry on the natural world at that event. So that was my most recent collaboration. I've been invited to work with Eastside Neighborhood Organization. They're doing a mural and they want some lines of poetry in that mural. So anything like that, it gets me really excited, because for me, so much of what this is about is community building. And that's where my love of the arts comes in, is that the arts bring people together, and also the arts give us a way to be responsive. That's really, it's in many ways, I argued earlier that the politics and poetry go together for me, but it's not directly political, but it's just so engaged, and I also just get excited about other people's work. That's how I'm inspired. I'm inspired by other people's poetry, by their activism, by their art, by music. This interview and just taking the time to think about poetry is reminding me of the importance of moving away from technology to be really present. And Instagram has a lot of poetry, and there's a lot of ways to find poetry through technology, but it really is an opportunity and an invitation to be more present with what's in here, but also with the world around us.